Good morning, gearheads, and welcome to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM for the pre-race show for the seventh round of the 2025 Formula One season, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola, just an hour away. This is Jon Massengale. I am the gentleman driver of the team, if you will, but not to worry, I am joined by the professionals. And joining us today, the man who needs no introduction to American Formula One fans, America's voice of motorsport, Bob Varsha. I was going to say morning, but good afternoon to you, Mr. Varsha. How are you?
That's right. Buenos dias, one way or another. Here I am in sunny Barcelona, and apologize for the picture. The only available table in this restaurant with a plug was backed up against the window. So if you can put up with that, we'll be fine. Although I am a bit amused because we're just 30 seconds into our show, and we've already lied once because Chris is not at the racetrack.
That's right. Also joining us, not from the racetrack, it's from his home studio in the UK, is Chris Medland. Good morning. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Medland.
Good afternoon. Yeah, it's I'm an hour behind Bob technically, and an hour behind Imola. But fortunately, I still see everything at the same time as everybody else. But yeah, it's good to be joining you guys from the top of the show with no worries about connections and Wi-Fi networks and things like that. So as much as I'm missing being on the ground, just one random week that I'll be doing this one from my my home studio.
Yeah, I know you don't miss but a couple of races a year, but it's got to be nice to get a little bit of a break, huh, Chris?
Big time. I mean, it's when stuff's going on like yesterday with Haas and the FIA, or even just with what's happened with Alpine, you want to be on the ground and asking questions of people directly, and you can't always be. But at the same time, it was so nice not to be getting on a plane on Wednesday ahead of the race, and in the same breath, the fact that I finish work tonight, it'll be a late finish, but I'll be in my own bed. I don't have to worry about getting to an airport, dropping a hire car, flying, traveling. So yeah, it takes that stress out of it. Instead, Bob had to do that overnight.
I was just thinking that, we've switched roles. I just got off the plane and the car and yada, yada, yada. Although I think my accommodation is probably going to be a few steps above yours once I get aboard the windsurf masted yacht to head for Monaco. But I digress.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that sounds pretty nice, Bob.
It is. It is.
Well, I want to start today with a little bit of a recap of yesterday, because I know we had our post-qualifying show yesterday, but it was a pretty exciting qualifying, and not everybody got to hear yesterday, so I do want to talk about that. It was one of the longest qualifyings I've ever experienced, with delays from crashes and then delays on decision-making for Ollie Behrman. But, of course, Oscar Piastri continues his really pretty amazing season by putting it on pole yesterday. And I guess I'll start with you, Bob, just to get your quick overview of really, let's start with just Oscar Piastri and his performance this season.
Yeah, the boss.
Yep.
Oscar, in his third season, he has shown himself to be every bit as talented and ready to mix it up as the Fernando Alonso's and Lewis Hamilton's and Max Verstappen's of the world. I mean, he is really someone Australians can be very proud of, because he has really shown his mettle. Yes, he has Mark Webber, who is probably the ultimate Formula One gladiator, but he is doing a great job and took the pole. And I'll talk more about that during my starting grid. But he's going to be tough to beat. Max Verstappen is right there on the front row with him, but they'll decide matters at the first turn, and away we'll go.
Yeah, and Chris Medland, that's a good segue, Bob, because, Chris, I want to ask you about about turn one with Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen, because, last year we saw Max and Lando at turn one quite a bit, right? And it seemed like Max found a way to get the better of Lando, whether it was get in his head or get up the inside. But so far, he hasn't had the same luck against Oscar Piastri this year, has he?
No, it's interesting because, of course, you've got to look at it in terms of how a situation plays out. Would Lando, if he'd had the exact same start that Oscar had in Jeddah, have played it the exact same way. If his car had been in the same position going into the braking zone, you don't actually know whether it's that Oscar is just a bit braver on the brakes or a bit more aggressive where he positions the car, or if it is just circumstance in that occasion where Lando hasn't had that sort of start against Max so far in that sort of situation. But he's had enough chances and hasn't pulled it off as Lando. Whereas with Oscar, I think we've seen the early markers have been set that say he's going to be really tough to pass and beat. And I remember asking Oscar about that when I was doing the TV interviews in Jeddah after that race. I said, is this important? It's the first time that you two have really gone wheel to wheel like this at the start of a race, and you're in a championship battle. Does it kind of set that tone? And he said no, in the sense that if it had been Max in my position, he'd have done exactly what I did to him, and we'd have had the same outcome. So he just thought it was circumstance. But I am so excited to see the next chapter of that today. I really do hope that both get off the line pretty cleanly and we get a proper battle rather than one just as breezed past the other before the first proper turn one. But I think it will be fascinating, because if Max has 25% chance of making an overtake there, he's going to go for it. He's going to be down the inside having a go. If it's the other way round and Oscar is on the back foot, he's not going to back out either, but he will have a little bit more to think about because, of course, Lando's his main title rival at the moment and starting fourth. So I think it could be a real kind of thrilling moment of the race, the key moment, potentially. I don't want to write off the following laps, but that will be a huge part of who could win if you get a clean race after that.
Well, and let's be honest. Go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, as Chris was talking about Piastri's willingness to mix it up, I thought it was significant that in qualifying, he didn't post a time and then wait to see if Max could beat it. Max had posted the time and was sitting on provisional pole, and Oscar came along and took it from him, which I tend to think is a significant moment. He knew he had to deliver, and he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And Chris, you alluded to something, and that is overtaking is not super easy here at Imola, and that's why this pole position is so important for Oscar Piastri. I think that's what you were alluding to a moment ago, right?
Yeah, it's a great iconic racetrack. It's brilliant watching F1 cars around there, and it's awesome in qualifying because, as we saw, lots of incidents, lots of accidents, mistakes are punished. But when you come to racing, it's just very narrow. There's not that many opportunities to get an overtaking maneuver done. The only real place is into the Tamburello chicane. You get a good DRS drag up to there. But if you've got decent enough top speed and you've got a DRS train potentially as well, it makes it very hard to overtake. I think we might see a bit more than people are kind of fearing, because if you do just get little breakaway battles, you've got to stay close in the final two corners. That's the tricky bit. They're downhill, medium speed left-handers. You can lose some real performance through there. But if you can stay close through there, you've got every chance of making a move into the Tamburello chicane. But we've seen in previous years that it's not quite been possible. I was interested, actually, if we think back 12 months, you had Lando Norris chasing down Max Verstappen in that scenario. And Max looked like he had the race, comfortably won from the first half of it. Lando came back at him in the second half, but he was just one lap too late getting into the DRS zone. And he needed to get into that zone to then use DRS to close up on one lap. And then the next lap, he'd have been close enough to try and make a move. So it shows it's not simple, but if you can just bridge that gap, you do have a chance. So I'm not going to say that nothing else will happen after the first corner, but you do know that you've got a big part of the job done from a driver point of view if you take the lead or gain a position at the start.
Yeah, and Bob, I want to ask you something about turn one that Chris was talking about, and that is, we saw Lando, like I mentioned last year, he was battling Max and just did not seem to have the confidence or gain the upper hand the most of the time. But Jeddah is the perfect example of watching Oscar Piastri completely managed that. He got out in front of Max and he held a position, and he did it unwavering, unequivocal, saying, "This is my corner. I took it," and no drama. He just did technically exactly what he needed to do, didn't he?
Yeah, well, that's the way the big boys race. It's you want me, come and get me. If I want you, I'm going to come for you. I suppose, given that Oscar is only in his third season of Formula One, in the past there were some pretty serious experience differentials at a place like Imola, especially after COVID. There weren't that many opportunities to explore the nuances of a place like Imola, for example. Jeddah, they were on a little bit more of an even experience level because, they'd both been racing there in the brief time that track has been in existence.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. Well, I know we focused on the front row here, and that's obviously a big reason. There's a good reason to do that, like we mentioned, that this is a difficult to overtake. And Bob, you're going to talk about the rest, but I do want to talk about some of the other players in the game here. Chris, you mentioned that Piastri's teammate, who is his main rival for the championship right now, Lando Norris, is down in fourth, but we have Russell in between there. So you've got Russell and Norris, and Chris, how do you think that they might be able to play into the early part of this race?
I think they're going to be hoping that Max and Oscar get really aggressive with each other at that first chicane, because that could open up opportunities. I mean, it's quite an interesting sequence of corners where you've got a left, right, left. So rather than just a simple left, right chicane, you've got the third segment of it, which actually does make it harder if you get a run on someone to get a move done. It's not like, for example, when Oscar passed Lando in Monza at the start of last year and it bulked Lando out of the chicane and Leclerc got him on the exit. A lot harder to do that. So they're going to want the top two to get aggressive. But I think we've seen that Russell could be a problem for Lando. The Mercedes race pace was okay, but it wasn't quite on McLaren level. On Friday, Ferrari felt like they were in really good shape race pace wise, but needed to sort their qualifying pace, and we all know how that went. I'm sure we'll talk about that like that in a bit. But for Mercedes, they found they were kind of in between, where they've quite often been a threat in qualifying, but never quite enough on a Sunday or for a main qualifying session to stick it on pole. Obviously, Kimi Antonelli did well to get himself a sprint pole, but that was a situation where I felt Mercedes maximised everything they could, actually maybe overachieved slightly by pipping Lando. And George could be a real thorn in Lando's side, because if Lando doesn't get ahead of George at the start, he could well find himself not in the fight for the win with the top two, because they could break away. It could be that Piastri and Verstappen are able to put a little bit of a gap if they've got the race pace advantage. Flip side of that then will be, even if there's not drama that leads to a collision or an incident that opens an opportunity to make a move on the first lap between Verstappen and Piastri, if Verstappen gets into the lead, his race pace might be enough that keeps the field more bunched up or closer. So that could be fascinating too, because that'll bring strategy into play. And at this point, you'd have to admit you've got two McLarens against one Red Bull and one Mercedes. So I don't think McLaren will hate that, and Lando, from his point of view, would probably quite enjoy seeing Max go into the lead rather than Oscar walking away with it.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And the pit stops are going to be so important. Now, looking back, McLaren's been the class of the field in terms of pit stops recently. So that's a source of comfort to both Oscar and Lando. But they're going to have to be very, very careful. Extra long pit lane, a lot of time lost. One stop is all anybody's going to want to do, unless we get safety cars and that sort of thing. And then, every strategy goes out the window.
And Bob, that's a good point, as we saw in qualifying yesterday, and Chris, you mentioned it, this circuit can be tight, and we could see safety cars here, and the probability is probably a little higher than average, just because you do have some peril here, right? So we could see a safety car. But you know what, guys? I'm just looking at the clock. Let's get our first break in real quick here. When we come back, we've got a few clips from some of the drivers, Oscar Piastri and more. You're listening to Speed City F1, back after these messages. All right, let's check in with the YouTubers, see what's going on in YouTube land. I have not even fired it up yet, so let's see. All right, let's see here. Thanks to Casey, who got our YouTube going. There's TW, there's Mike Bowles. Both saying, hit the like button. Woohoo, here we go. Joe of Oyster Bay is here on time. There we go. Mike Bowles says, it seems Lando, sorry to say, has the physical ability, but seems that the mentally falls short when the pressure comes on. Yeah, kind of hard to argue with that a little bit right now, Mike. And who knows how that can turn around. We've got a clip from Lando that I want to play. that kind of backs up what you're talking about, Mike.
You know, I listened to Jacques Villeneuve, the 97 world champion, talking about Lando and mental health and what have you. And he said that he had been working with a sports psychologist for many years and recommended that for Lando, just somebody to offer another perspective, you know, get your head on straight, don't worry about things you can't control, all that sort of thing. And they sound like a cliche, but it sounds like Lando needs some kind of help in developing that perspective so that he can, you know, race a little more freely without worried about being perfect at every corner.
Yeah, I think that's
it
common.
wouldn't hurt. I do think he has some good people around him, though, and he does work on that sort of stuff as well. I don't know if he goes quite as specific as what Jack is talking about, but he, you see it when he gets it right. Like when it goes well, you know it's in there. You can see him unlock some incredible performance, but he just has to find a way of doing it more consistently, doesn't he?
Okay.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Thank you, George Russell, for bringing us back. I promised a couple of clips before when we went to break, and I think I want to start with the polls there. I want to start with Oscar Piastri because everything seems to be going well for Oscar right now. He's in a good headspace. He's driving quickly. He's got a great car, and it kind of shows in his interview. Let's hear from Oscar Piastri after qualifying yesterday.
Yeah, I was not going to be happy if that cost me pole, but in the end it was enough. The rest of the lap was really strong, and I was very happy with it. Just that was a bit of a spanner in the works, but the team did a great job of getting the car in a good window. It obviously wasn't an easy session with all the red flags, the delays, and just the tyres as well were not very easy to stay on top of. So we did a good job, and felt like I found my feet nicely into Q3, and both the laps felt good, but the second one was very strong.
How much confidence can you take into tomorrow's race, not just from that lap, but the job you've kind of done all weekend really to build up to tomorrow's race?
I think, we're confident. Our race pace yesterday looked quite good. Obviously getting a good start's going to be important tomorrow, but let's see. But no, feeling good. I think qualifying was where we felt we had some work to do yesterday, and the car's been quick, but it's not been the most consistent, and I think today we did a good job of making it a bit easier to tame. So I'm excited for tomorrow.
Yeah, he sounds confident, doesn't he, Chris?
Yeah, very. Rightly so as well, in the sense that we've seen what the McLaren can do when it's clear, in clear air at the front. And essentially, he's just thinking, I've got to get off the line. If I do my job properly and get a good launch, then I've got every chance of leading out of the first chicane, and the race is almost mine. Now, it's not Monaco where you can then just go at whatever pace you want, but it's kind of close with the lack of overtaking or how hard it can be to overtake. So I think he'll be... He will be confident. Again, we mentioned it earlier with where Lando is. That's the other reason, is even if Max gets the better of him, even if it doesn't quite go perfectly, he can still extend his advantage today by a good couple of points, either by just finishing second and Lando's third, or if Lando doesn't get past George or has an even worse race. So he just knows that getting away cleanly is going to be the crucial part of his afternoon to then put him in a strong position championship-wise.
Yeah, and Bob, don't you know that I feel like Oscar has his head on his shoulders so great right now that he will think through that. And if Max does get ahead of him at turn one, he's probably going to say, okay, I'm just going to deal with that and maybe try to get the position back. Or if I don't, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. And that's what champions do. You know, take what the race gives you. If you don't do your job perfectly, if you don't get to the first turn first, okay, settle into second, watch your mirrors. Pick up 18 points instead of 25. And as Chris mentioned, you can pad your lead. So it's he really is in a great place right now for such a young driver.
Yeah.
Oscar's just in great shape.
Well, let's go ahead and in contrast to that, I want to play the clip from Lando Norris after qualifying yesterday because it is very much a contrast. Let's hear from Lando Norris.
Yeah, it was good until the final 2 laps. Just not quick enough. That's all.
Not quick enough because you pushed too hard or you made some mistakes?
No idea. The lap time just doesn't come. I just same answers every weekend. I mean, it's a regular thing. So I feel better until I get to it. Obviously, just need to work on it a lot. It's just not good enough.
Tomorrow, race day, pace is generally much better. I know it's hard to overtake around here, but you're always good around here. Give you a bit of hope to recover onto the podium?
Yeah, but not a lot. I don't think our pace is that much better. I mean, it's definitely going to be better, I presume, than the others. But yeah, I'm here to win, and I don't have much of a chance of winning. So if I can get on the podium, that would be nice.
Yeah, it just short, sweet, quick answers does not sound confident. Honestly, I think it's just. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
If I could get on the podium, that would be nice. That doesn't sound like a guy who's gunning for race wins in the championship. He's a guy who's just trying to grab a point here and there. Doesn't sound like a championship perspective to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said it was particularly sweet in the sense of short and sweet. Short and almost a bit bitter, wasn't it? Because Lando's always been hard on himself. And strangely, I think that sometimes opens him up to have people support him for saying, okay, you're being overly harsh, you're being honest, but also it really does open him up to be criticised even more because you believe what he says. And if he says he's made mistakes or not done a good enough job, then you kind of back him and go, yeah, you're not doing well enough. They are small margins we're talking about, but he made bigger errors on that final Q3 run, which is what's left him vulnerable to George Russell as well. And he was, I think, nearly 3/10 off Piastri come the end of the session by not getting together his final lap. But I just think that Lando needs to, when Lando gets it all together, I still think he's maybe marginally quicker than Piastri over one lap. I feel like that raw pace is maybe there, but it's just so rarely accessed. And Piastri operates at 98, 99 and 100% far more often. So Lando's going to need to learn from how Piastri is going about doing that sort of stuff. But he's also just got to find a way of making sure he limits his losses. You know, a day like yesterday, don't have the mistakes that drop you an extra position on the grid that leave you now fighting with Mercedes. Like his worst case scenario should have been 3rd place. It should have been a 10th off the other two, and he's just missed out. Flip side again, go to Miami and the start there, fighting with Max. I still feel that Lando was a little bit unlucky because of the way Max handled the first few corners and the snap of oversteer he had. But Lando ends up off the track and losing a bunch of places, not just one place to Max Verstappen or not gaining a place from Max at the start. Oscar, I feel like, as we talked about, the impression we get is he will be more smart in the way he fights, but he won't leave himself in a position where he ends up tumbling down the order by a huge number of positions. We may get proven wrong in half an hour or so and sound very stupid, but that impression is what you get from Oscar, that he'll just cut his losses a little bit more. Whether that means he ends up second to Max, he's a bit frustrated, but he's still got good points, or he gets him later in the race. With Lando, you don't feel that's always the case, and that's what I think he will need to iron out as well. Certainly in a season that's looking more and more like it's going to be Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. There's 16 points between them right now. It's not huge, as much as Oscar's on a run of 4 wins in the last 5 and three wins in a row. Lando is still right up there after his win at the start and plenty of second places. So he just needs to make sure that he's always getting the maximum result out of it that is on the table for him, and he hasn't yet done that. By, I think, sometimes believing the maximum result is always to win, and therefore he has to give everything to go and get the win. Part of me loves the mindset of someone always trying to win a race, but to win a championship, you've got to be a bit more smart than that sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I just, it's like you said, it's only 16 points. We're only in the 7th round. There's plenty of time for Lando, but he just got to get an attitude adjustment to make this a championship. But hey, guys, I want to play another clip because we didn't get to hear this yesterday, and after the huge crash for the other Red Bull driver, for Yuki Tsunoda, and who, it's funny, up until that crash yesterday, he had kind of settled into a good spot and was becoming that second driver, that teammate that Max Verstappen needed, that Red Bull needed him to be. And that crash, I know this is literally just one crash, but let's hear from Yuki Tsunoda after that crash because he definitely was in the mindset after that. So let's hear from Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah, I'm okay, thankfully, but at the same time, very frustrating that how I ended up in such early stage and especially a very unnecessary situation.
How tough has the car been today just to get the most out of it? Did it feel like you were just chasing the pace a little bit?
I mean, it's kind of up and down. I mean, some sessions I felt okay, some sessions suddenly dropped a lot. And FP3 wasn't. 2 minutes was a bit mystery how I ended up. Obviously, lap didn't able to put it all together, but at the same time was a pretty poor pace. And we didn't know exactly why, but we made a lot of change and felt pretty good in first turn 2, turn 3, and the crashed immediately after. So, yeah, just very ashamed that I feel like the car was quite there and just put myself into the wall with such a stupid mistake.
Yeah, I saw your eyebrows pop up, Chris. Yes, a stupid mistake. I may have been that. I don't like to hear a driver saying it that way. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like Lando in the way we've spoken about Lando, isn't it? Yuki's always been very harsh on himself as well and accepts when he makes an error, or usually accepts when he makes an error, which is, I think, generally been one of his strengths that certainly helped him in the junior team because he knew he wasn't going to get away with lying about stuff and covering it up or blaming other people. The blame always falls on the driver. They have to go and prove themselves, and Red Bull can be very harsh about the way they treat them. But I think it hardened him to stuff. I do. We talked about it post-quali. I am surprised, now he's admitted it as well, that it was his error in the sense of taking too much curb so early and he says risking so much so early in the session. There was no need for it then. So, I mean, it was an enormous crash for, in a sense, a small mistake. But it was, if it's a judgment he made and it didn't pay off, trying to find more lap time, then yeah, he's got to wear that. And because it's not only the fact that today it means he starts in the pit lane and they had to change his chassis and that he's got very little hope of picking up any points this weekend, but it's also the cost to the team. This is a cost cap era and he's just written the car off. So, early in the season as well. And Williams often referenced the crashes they had last year and how costly those were. Well, you can't afford that, certainly when you're a front-running team. And right now you're juggling this year's car, which if you can improve it slightly, you give Max Verstappen a chance of winning the title, and the 2026 regs.
Yeah, I think Yuki's comments about how it was stupid, I shouldn't have done it, I got too aggressive, that tells me that he is extremely conscious of the Red Bull way of doing things and his position in the team. He never said it, but he may as well have said, I was trying to be more like Max, and it just bit me, and I regret it. And, more power to him.
Yeah. I mean, look, obviously you want your drivers to be responsible for what they did. But Chris, you said a small mistake, and yes, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's the smallest mistake. But it was a pretty big bite out of that corner yesterday. I think we mentioned this on the post-qualifying show, but that was it was a pretty big bite out of that corner. And had you been watching that, let's say, and analyzing it in slow motion before the crash, you probably could have predicted that was going to happen because it was not the way to take that corner, was it?
You certainly could have predicted that it would unsettle the car. I mean, I don't know if you would have predicted where the car would have ended up and the way it would have flipped over the barrier or onto the barrier and things like that.
Well, yeah.
Because quite often I think a driver would almost expect at that point that they would just have to, catch a bit of oversteer or whatever. We saw it a few times through the first chicane as well, the Tamburello chicane, where a few drivers had moments and we had the two Racing Bulls drivers actually spin off, not cause huge damage, but both have spins at that corner. And that's also where Colapinto crashed. So it's you can see how those curves would unsettle the car. Yuki, you would expect as well, would have learned by that point in the weekend how much of an impact hitting a curb would have. And he was probably prepared for some sort of unsettling, but he felt it was going to give him more lap time if he got it right. So these are very, very impressive, talented drivers. They know what they're doing. They know what they're attempting to do. They know what the feel of the car is going to be. that won't have been the first time he's hit that curb and not known what the likely outcome would be. So I still think it would have caught him out in that sense. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. But yeah, at the same time, it was a big clout. And if it was the first time he'd taken so much curb, then that's always a risk you're running when you're doing something new.
Yeah, and it was one of the most dramatic looking crashes of this year so far, with him turning upside down on the tire wall. In fact, we didn't see that until the replay. We saw the car sitting there, and it looked extremely torn up and damaged. But I was like, I didn't realize that he had been upside down until we saw the replay of that. But all right, guys, let's get another quick break in. And when we come back, we'll be less than 30 minutes from the Imola Grand Prix. Back after these messages. All right. Still live on YouTube. Kevin Kelly's here. Hey, KK. He says, good to see Yuki walk away from that one. Kevin Kelly's texted me and said, you look alive. I said, yes, I have. I'm feeling pretty good today, actually. I worked outside in my new garage that I added to my house yesterday, a whole bunch, and out in the Texas heat. And like, probably wasn't advisable after being sick all week, but I felt pretty good. So thanks, KK. Let's see.
Just sweat it out.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. Had all the kids at home at one point yesterday. It was really weird. My son off the road. He has a weekend off from racing. He didn't know what to do with himself. He brought over his
racing.
Pardon?
Watch some racing.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
He brought over his new car. He has a 1998 Nissan GTT, not GTR, but GTT, the four-door version of the GTR. Really, he put a new titanium exhaust on it. It was really amazing.
That kid's allowance is too big, John.
He doesn't have time to spend his paycheck because he's driving all over the planet, flying all over the planet, racing. So Chris says, I resemble that remark.
I was thinking I somehow still find time to spend too much of my paychecks, and that's why I keep having to take on more work. It's probably the guilt of never being around.
TW says,
Right.
I don't get why there isn't a bigger audience on YouTube. Your best insight and interviews. Thanks, TW. It's the algorithm, one of these days. We had a really nice uptake on the Oscar Piastri effect, the Mark Webber effect on Oscar Piastri. All right, here we go. Coming back.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
There's a growing expense eating into your company's profits. It's your cloud computing bill. You may have gotten a deal to start, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. What if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that. OCI is next generation cloud design for every workload, where you can run any application, including any AI projects, faster and more securely for less. In fact, Oracle has a special promotion where you can cut your cloud bill in half when you switch to OCI. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for compute, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Modal, Skydance Animation, and today's innovative AI tech companies who upgraded to OCI and saved. Offer only for new U.S. customers with a minimum financial commitment. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/formula. That's oracle.com/formula. All right, guys, we are 25 minutes from the Imola Grand Prix. Formula One in its 7th round already this season. It is flying by, gentlemen. And I have a couple of more clips that I wanted to play. And the first one, Ollie Behrman had quite a bit of controversy yesterday in qualifying right at the end of the session, and he has the right attitude about this. And let's hear from him first, and we'll discuss it a little bit. Here's Ollie Behrman.
I didn't have a view. I was just in the car. From our side, the quali went well, and I have no clue what happened to for me not to be out there right now, but c'est la vie.
But is it disappointing given, I guess, the car felt good and I think you've looked good or improving at least as the weekend's gone on?
Yeah, of course.
What's possible tomorrow?
I'm not sure. It's tough to overtake here. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Sorry.
Hey, Chris Medland, why don't you, I saw you wrote an article on racer.com about this. Why don't you set this up for us and give us your opinion on this?
Yeah, I was pretty frustrated by this one because there just seems to be so many contradictions in the FIA's explanations of stuff. But what happened was Colapinto crashed at the Tamburello chicane, so it's the first proper corner. It's in the first sector. The clock was just about to tick down to 0 at the end of Q1, so you've got a number of cars that were actually going to be ahead of that point on track who could still finish laps completely unimpeded, which is why I actually thought they weren't going to throw the red flag out there. Anyone coming across Colapinto would have had to slow down anyway. But they opted to go with the red flag. That came a little bit after the crash, and Behrman had crossed the line and completed a lap that was good enough to get him through into Q2 before the red flag alerts were on his steering wheel, before the red lights were flashing trackside, so before the timing tower said red flag. So every indicator we got said the red flag was thrown after Behrman completed his lap. But at the end of Q1, the FIA and race control deleted his lap time, so he was eliminated in Q1. That's what Haas were arguing about. And that's why we got a 12-minute delay after they'd repaired the barrier for the FIA. And this is fair play to them here. Race control and the stewards wanted to check the timing data to be certain that the timing data was correct to then eliminate Behrman. And the reason for that was, I do have the full explanation actually from the FIA, where they said that the red flag was set at 16 hours, 32 minutes, 17.6 seconds. And Behrman crossed the line at 16 hours, 32 minutes, 20.9 seconds. So 3.3 seconds after the red flag was shown. Now, in this explanation, the FIA also say that the abort signal and red flag was showing on the start gantry. Now, the abort signal was something unusual that I was genuinely unaware of until it was pointed out in a good article by The Race earlier today, I think, or last night, which is orange lights rather than red on the start gantry. But at the time that Behrman crossed the line and Lance Stroll ahead of him, the checkered flag was out because the clock had hit 0 and the lights had gone red to show the end of a session, like they always do at the end of each part of qualifying. So there was some confusion in that sense. But the key issue here for me was the FIA said that there was 3.3 seconds between them setting the red flag and Behrman finishing his lap. And every onboard shot you see tells you that that is not the case in terms of the alert going to the drivers and going to the trackside panels. It's nearly 2 seconds after he completes his lap that the red lights start coming on his dash and on the trackside panels. So that means either this timing data is wrong and it's not correct that they threw the red flag at the time they say, or when they threw the red flag, it took 5 seconds for that to then be displayed to everyone, which can't be allowed to happen because that's a huge safety issue, having such a delay. So something doesn't add up still. Haas have actually come out today with another statement. They were very unhappy yesterday. Ao Komatsu was pretty punchy with what he said about it because he said that he felt the team had really strong evidence that the lap should have stood. Haas have asked for further written clarification on the decision so that they can review it more comprehensively. So they've also asked what measures the FIA and race control can put in place moving forward to ensure it's avoided in the future for the benefit of F1, because as it stands right now, Haas still think that lap should have counted, don't understand why it didn't, and the FIA don't seem to be able to give a full explanation that covers everything off. And that's why I was pretty frustrated, because I felt like what was being said, and then you ask questions to the FIA and say, well, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, and they didn't follow up.
Yeah, Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think that the tragedy is you can't undo the whole thing and say, okay, we're convinced Behrman was in the right. You can't unwind the thing and put Behrman back out there again. And there's no way you can resolve such a thing. I'm like Chris, at a loss as to why they decided the way they did. And unless and until we get a fuller explanation, it's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, and I know that I don't blame Haas for filing the, continuing to follow up on that, because, again, like Ollie said in that interview, it is a crucial thing here to get as high up as you can in qualifying. So
just one point I'd say here, John, as well, is the fact that we had that big delay between Q1 and Q2, which is where I say it's to Race Control's credit that they were looking into it. They wanted to make sure they got it right. But it still seems like they maybe didn't get it right. And if they did, then they can't comprehensively explain to anyone why, without any big grey areas existing, why it was right. So the fact that stuff still doesn't add up after such a big delay, and it really shouldn't have been one, should it? We were talking about one car, one position between Q1 and Q2.
Yeah.
And they spent as much time as they needed. They have the backup Race Control remote center in Geneva. They've got so many resources on this these days, as they should have for such a governing body of global motorsport. I just don't see how we're still in a position after all of that. This isn't a opinion idea either. It's not about a racing incident or something. This is black and white. Was this the time right or the time wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just don't understand why it still is so opaque.
Yeah, and why it took 12 minutes. I think of, in my mind, the gold standard in this is the NFL. You see, I mean, the worst thing they'll do is go to a break, and you come back and you've got a decision, right? And that's what, 2 or 3 minutes? At 12 minutes, I wasn't sure if the whole delay that we had was because of Behrman or not, because there wasn't much communication during that time either. So it was really vague, and it extended the qualifying session so much. It was very unusual. But all right, well, Bob, Varsha, are you ready to give us a rundown of the grid? We've even had, I think, apparently a notification overnight about Yuki Tsunoda, but are you ready to give us a rundown of the grid?
I am, absolutely.
All right, well, take it away.
Here we go. Row 1, starting from pole, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Third pole of the year from the championship leader, tying Max Verstappen for the series high. Also the 10th pole for McLaren at Imola, but their first since 2005. P2 is Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, who fell short of pole by just 34 thousandths of a second. While his rivals slipped in last weekend, Max headed to the mighty Nordschleife to get his GT3 certification with his own team, driving a Ferrari. On to row 2, P3, George Russell in the Mercedes. The stealth Brit, I like to call him, starting third for the third time in the last 4 races. It's also his career best start at Imola. P4, Lando Norris in the McLaren. The opposite of Russell, Lando starts from outside the top 3 for the third time in 4 Grand Prix. Row 3, P5, Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. The first time an Aston has appeared in Q3 this season, and Fernando's highest grid position at Imola since 2006. That was when he and Renault engaged in a legendary duel with Michael Schumacher's Ferrari. Michael won the race, but Alonso won the title. P6 is Carlos Sainz in the Williams. Quick, who was the last Williams driver to start in the top 3 rows of a Grand Prix for 3 straight events? Try Valtteri Bottas in 2014.
Wow.
Row 4. P7, Alex Albon in the other Williams. Same position he started in 2 weeks back in Miami, but he was out-qualified by his teammate Sainz for the 4th straight race. P8, Lance Stroll in the other Aston Martin. How about 2 Williams and 2 Astons in the top 8? And both Astons ran Q3 on medium compound Pirellis, not the softs, as everybody else did, and you would expect. Row 5, P9, Isaac Hadjar, Racing Bulls. The Friday crash is long forgotten as the top qualified rookie, his first top 10 since Suzuka 4 races ago. P10, Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, looking solid all weekend, starting top 10 for the 3rd straight race. Row 6, P11, Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. What on earth is going on with the red cars? All Leclerc could say after being dumped in Q2 was, my God, my God, my God. God doesn't care, Charles. P12 is Lewis Hamilton of the other Ferrari. No trust in his car's brake all weekend. The first time ever at Imola that no Ferrari made the top 10. 2nd straight 12th place start as well for the 7-time champion. Row 7, P13, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. The final Italian connection in the race, having grown up in nearby Bologna, Kimi starts outside the top 10 for the first time since his debut in the season opener in Melbourne. P14, Gabriel Bartoletto in the Sauber, the milestone 600th Grand Prix for the Swiss team, and just 1 place off the Brazilian season best 13th place start in Miami. Row 8, P15, Liam Lawson for Racing Bulls. Another Q1 departure for the Kiwi as he tries to find the form he showed last season in limited appearances. P16, what do you know, Franco Colapinto in the Alpine. A heavy crash in Saturday's final practice didn't prevent Jack Doohan's replacement from barging into Q2 for the fourth time in his brief career. Docked one grid place for a premature exit from his garage after a red flag. Row 9, P17, Nico Hulkenberg in the Sauber. Unlike teammate Bortoletto, the Hulk equals his worst qualifying position of the season. P18, Esteban Ocon in the Haas. Unable to squeeze pace out of the car, the American team, with owner Gene Haas on site this weekend, produced their worst team qualifying of the season. Row 10, P19, Ollie Behrman in the Haas. We talked about that, the victim of what appears to have been an erroneous steward's decision. Behrman finished a lap quick enough to move onto Q2, only to have it disallowed as coming after the red flag. And starting from the pit lane in overnight news, Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull, who crashed out of Q1 by driving too aggressively over the curbs. He later described his mistake as stupid. Let's go racing.
Bob, that was great. I'm excited for this next. But Chris, I noticed you actually had your microphone muted during Bob's grid talk.
Yeah,
Much appreciated.
For once I thought I wouldn't interrupt him. It's been a more rare occurrence, hasn't it, this year? But I nearly did jump back on just to say that the Stealth Brit I thought was a great nickname for George Russell, the way he's been going about his business. So I like that one.
Absolutely. You can interrupt me anytime, mate.
All right, guys, let's get our final break in. And when we come back, we'll be just about 10 minutes from the start of the Imola Grand Prix right after this. All right, let's see what the YouTubers are saying. Let's see. Hey, Mike Bowles gave us a cue. He said it's about time for Mr. V's grid talk. Andy P, simple explanation. They screwed up and didn't have the mechanisms to fix it. That was our discussion, but yeah. TW says, yeah, Chris, take a shot. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I was annoyed by it yesterday. I was annoyed as well because I chased so many people at the FIA just to ask them questions of it. Yeah, like generally just saying, was it this, was it that, giving them an opportunity to have a right reply, and they don't respond either. So not particularly helpful when they then will probably be unhappy if we're critical of them. But they need to, as Bob said, they need to communicate better. As you said, John, actually, in that delay, there was no explanation on the race control screen or nothing from the FIA itself to say this is why the delay has been extended. So.
Yeah, that was actually very strange to me. I'm just checking out the television broadcast. The weather looks great. Skies are clear. There was a tiny bit of rain yesterday, apparently, and then they showed a little shot of some rain off in the distance not too far away.
Yeah, I was actually about to check the weather radar because I've got the race control message up that there's a risk of rain is 20% for this race.
Huh.
And I tell you what, that would be fun.
Yeah.
It looks like it's decreasing. So they just say the slight chance of one isolated shower, but I think it's unlikely looking at it.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it on the broadcast. I see just a few white puffy clouds, but it does not look like it's even a chance. Jamie Chadwick on the broadcast, on the Sky broadcast. I'm watching ESPN.
Yeah, after her win in ELMS, I think she had. Was it a Paul Ricard? I can't remember where it was that she had the win.
Yes.
She had
it was ELMS.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, can help you cut your cloud bill in half if you act by May 31st. See if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/formula. All right, guys, like I mentioned, we're 10 minutes away from the Formula One Imola Grand Prix coming up right here on Channel 81. And before we get into that, I do want to talk about Jack Crawford, the American racing in Formula 2 again this year. He's had a great weekend, hasn't he? His name has been brought up for the Cadillac seat, amongst others. but he actually won the sprint race yesterday, and he finished, what was it, sixth, I think, Chris, in the feature race. Not a bad weekend for the young American.
Yeah, very, very strong results. It was quite an interesting one at the front, actually, because the championship leader, Richard Verschoor, had a tough start to the weekend and a poor qualifying, and he was well out of the picture for the sprint race. He got himself 2 points with ninth in the feature, but it meant that everyone had an opportunity to gain some ground, and it's just closed it up. So, yeah, Jack with a win that came off the back of second place in the feature in Jeddah last time out in F2, and he was on pole for that race. So he's on a good run. These are his first points of the season, have come in the last 3 rounds, and they've instantly catapulted him up to 7th in the championship. But the, I guess, more important stat is he's only 26 points behind the championship leader. So seeing as he scored all of his points in those last 3 races, if he can keep this run going into momentum, he's going to be well in the frame for the title this year. But it looks like a lot of drivers will be, and a lot of them are associated with junior teams as well. So championship leader right now is Alex Dunn, Irish driver, who's a McLaren junior. Luke Browning is second, who is Williams junior as well. Then I mentioned Richard Verschoor, who's dropped to third. But Arvid Lindblad as well, the young Red Bull rookie, he's fifth. He is the youngest winner in F2 history after his win in the sprint in Jeddah. He's one I think we'll see at Racing Bulls next year, if not maybe even some stage this year, if there's any call for a change later in the season. So he's one to keep an eye on as well. He was second to Jack yesterday. Crawford did well just to keep him at bay in the final stages of that race, and then he finished fourth with the fastest lap today. So yeah, really closing up, and a good weekend for Jack to build some momentum heading into a big one in Monaco, where qualifying really is everything.
Yeah, well, it's great to see him trending in the right direction right now. And like you said, Lindblad, Jonathan Green was down in New Zealand with at the Toyota Racing Series and saw Lindblad just clean up down there, and got to sit with him. We have some good interviews with him in all of our social and our YouTube and stuff. So he's definitely one to watch, like you mentioned. All right, well,
and
Bob,
the reason that's important, I was just quickly going to say, is because by winning that Toyota Racing Series down in New Zealand, he got the super license points he needs to be able to take part in F1 sessions. So he's still too young, technically. I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to double check his age, but yeah, he's still 17. So he has to do the special dispensation bit that the FIA can give. But he'll turn 18 in August as well. So that's why I say he could even be racing later in the year.
Yeah. Well, Bob, you got me excited talking a while ago, walking through the grid, because you talked about Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz and Albon and Lance Stroll all in that 5, 6, 7, 8 position. And, of course, Hadjar and Gasly in 9 and 10th. You know, behind the leaders, we talked all about the leaders, but this is going to be fun to watch, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I really hope, all false prejudices aside, that Fernando Alonso can do something in the Aston Martin today. Get some points.
Yeah.
One for the old guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, what do you think? He's got a pretty good shot at holding on to some points. Don't you agree?
Oh, surely today's the day. I mean, I'm going to keep this weather radar up in case there is some rain north of the track that doesn't look like it'll hit it, but it's just the way it kind of bubbles up is what's exciting, I think, weather forecasters. It's probably, I can do the maths here because I've got the distances, about 15k north, so 10 miles north. It just appears. Now it's moving away. It's not hitting the circuit, but it's just the way that could happen at any point near the venue as well. So that will be something Fernando will not want, because if it stays dry and he keeps it clean at the start, stays out of trouble, and normally he's very good at race starts, then he's got a chance for a big haul of points, because Carlos Sainz in 6th alongside him in a Williams that's quick, but not as quick as, say, a McLaren or a Red Bull that could have been there. So I think he backed himself to hold on to the position he's in. And Williams, we've got to keep an eye on as well, because you've got Sainz in 6th, Albon in 7th. And I saw that Albon had, or the team even confirmed it as well, he had a bit of a concern over a fuel system leak. So the team were investigating a possible fuel issue on his car, and they said following checks, everything is in order. So he was sent out to the grid as normal. But just something to keep in the back of our minds in case there's any issues for Albon later in the race.
Ah, interesting. Hey, Chris, what about tires? Because, look, let's face it, the call from Aston Martin to go to the medium tire yesterday in qualifying was a brilliant strategy move. But how do you think the tires play into today?
Yeah, I mean, Aston, by doing that, means they don't have any new medium tyres left, only used ones. But then that's the same with George Russell, who did his final lap on mediums as well in Q3. And I think everyone will be looking at a one-stop, starting on the medium, switching to the hard later on. The Pirelli kind of simulations say between laps 19 and 25. But they say the second quickest is actually a two-stopper. Rather than doing the opposite and going hard-medium, it's to start in the medium and do 2 stints on the hard. Now, don't forget, we're talking medium and hard, but these are the softest 3 compounds Pirelli can bring. The C6 hadn't been used before, was the soft that everyone used in qualifying and struggled with. So the medium and the hard are essentially the 2 softest tires they've ever raced before. So it will be tricky.
This race being essentially the home team. This race being essentially the home team. Yeah, I could see them starting that. And if we get a safety car or, God forbid, a red flag, then all bets are off. Then everybody can come in and clamp on the hards and go the rest of the way if it's not too early. So, yeah, I think if I'm Ferrari, I've got to do something. So why not start? Heck, if you've got any fresh softs around, start on those.
Yeah. Hey, Chris.
And just to back up on that, sorry, we're talking about safety cars and red flags. Very much a possibility based on what we've seen the rest of this weekend, because in the F2 race we talked about, there was a safety car in that mid-race. In the Porsche Super Cup, that was the last race before the Grand Prix, there was a big red flag needed at this very start because of multiple crashes at the Tamburello chicane. Everyone was okay, but quite a lot of debris. And that could easily happen too, because everyone knows they need to get their elbows out and do something at the start if it's going to run clean. And when it's like that, that sometimes then leads to an incident that stops it running clean.
Hey, Chris, I want to ask you about Colapinto, because we really haven't talked about him a whole lot this week. We had the crash. He had a crash yesterday in qualifying. But, he's coming in, replacing Jack Doohan, and I just want to give him a little discussion here.
Yeah, I think the crash is something that's really soured his weekend, because actually the pace he was showing was a good step from Friday to Saturday. He was doing a very solid job. Obviously, he's just back in the car. Flavio Briatore says he wants him to be fast, not crash and score points. And I'd say he was actually doing the fast bit to the right level, at least, if he'd have kept it clean in that session. And he would have gone through to Q2 and probably dropped out in the middle of Q2, I think, maybe even the lower half of it. So he ends up roughly where he should have been. I'll forgive him the pit lane incident as well, because he just wasn't ever going to know for sure. He's thinking of a million other things as someone who's just got back into the car, and the team didn't want him to go out into the pit lane when they released him. They want him to just stop before the pit lane. So I'll let him off that. I just think he needs a clean race. He's one who just needs the experience in the car so that he can build on it, especially going to Monaco. He doesn't need to be a hero here. If he finishes in 16th and he's not made any big mistakes, then that will be really good learning and really important for him. So don't expect miracles from him. Just expect, hopefully, just a solid performance, because there will be pressure and scrutiny because of the way he's replaced Doohan. There'll be a lot of that.
Yeah. And of course, Flavio Briatore, who said he had 5 races, and then he said, no, he's got all the time he needs. So I don't know what's going on there. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right, guys, we got about a minute left. So let's do a quick round of predictions. And you know what, Bob, Varsha, you look prepared. You did all your grid preparation. So let's hear your predictions first.
Did you see me flipping a coin?
Yeah.
I'm going to go radical on this one. I'm going to say George Russell, Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri.
I thought you were going to say Fernando Alonso. I thought you were going to keep going down the...
No.
All right, Chris Medland, go ahead, buddy.
I am going to go still slightly radical, because it's boring to say Oscar's going to win it. So I'm going to say Max is going to win it, then Oscar, and then George holds on to third.
Okay, all right. Well, that leaves it wide open for me to go ahead and say Piastri will win this, and Verstappen, and then I'm going to say Lando that picks that up. So, all right, guys, thanks for tuning, everybody, and stay with us for the race, and then join us for the post-race right after.